the investigation. Now,
let's be clear. If she asks 6 questions, you'll be banging the bell 6 times.
Here's a question. How much trouble do you think Dominic Raab is actually in? One school of thought, I mean, clearly, we've heard quite a lot. Some of it less, if you're that frightened of a tomato, possibly don't.
I think the tomato has been hotly disputed.
But
the bigger revelation there for me was that he didn't have a Pret sandwich that he liked every day. The idea that he was throwing things out of his Pret sandwich is astonishing news.
Surely by now he could have chosen one which didn't have tomato in it. But clearly there have been enough allegations. This has gone on for several days now. We had a former Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, Simon McDonald, on the show yesterday saying people were scared to go into his office, and he hadn't raised concerns about anyone else's behaviour before. Now that there are 2, the line from Number 10 was, well, there's been no formal complaint. There are now 2 formal complaints. But we saw what happened with Priti Patel. There were formal complaints about her. She was found to have bullied them. She said she didn't realise she was doing it, and she got to stay anyway.
And Simon McDonald kind of made that point about Raab. He didn't really understand. He wasn't aware of the impact of his behaviour when we tried to make him aware of it. Dominic Raab is a difficult bloke. I've interviewed Dominic Raab and seen him behaving in a fairly sort of wide-eyed and controlling kind of fashion with his staff, demanding that all the doors are shut and that everyone's silent so he can concentrate on what he's going to say to me, that sort of thing. Quite sort of what you would call slightly odd behaviour that a lot of ministers don't resort to. Whether it constitutes full-blown bullying is, I guess, for this inquiry to decide. I wouldn't say that a lot of these revelations are particularly new about Dominic Raab. We've known that there's been a conveyor belt of people from his private office in various departments, that he's an exacting taskmaster, which veers towards what some people would call bullying. But it comes in the context of all the other stuff that's been going on. Rishi Sunak's lost Gavin Williamson already. The Parliamentary Party and, whisper it quietly, the media have got a sort of taste for blood, as it were. There's no shortage of people with things to say about Dominic Raab. I was just scrolling through, one of the roundup stories online here. And, day after day after day... in department after department after department, there's people with not very nice things to say about him. But as you say, whether this is enough to remove him from his job, it's a bit early to say. But this is certainly going to be, as you observed at the top, a much more uncomfortable session. I don't think we'll see Dominic Raab winking at Angela Rayner today and pulling out some of the other favoured tactics during his time at this dispatch box.
So we can see Dominic Raab just sitting behind him on the front bench, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, on one side, and Mel Stride, the Work and Pensions Secretary.
Well done there.
Thanks very much.
I could hear your brain whirring as you thought, what job has Mel Stride got? Marked lack of sort of... A couple of women either side might have softened the image.
Well, it does look like the boys have turned out for the lad.
It looks a bit like, what was that Hale and Pace thing, de management back in the day. There's, if they were... You expect to see them with a sort of curly wire out of their ears asking you to move on a Saturday night.
Right, here we go then. Grab your popcorn. This is Angela Rayner, question number 1 at Deputy PMQs Unpacked.
Mr. Speaker, and can I share the Deputy Prime Minister's remarks regarding the Sikh community and, most importantly, about the incident in Poland last night? I know the whole House stands united in our support for the Ukrainian people and sends condolences for the tragic loss of life. And Britain has an unshakable commitment to NATO and our allies, including Poland. The government has rightly requested we establish the facts and avoid unhelpful speculation, so I understand that the Deputy Prime Minister might not be able to go further today. But does he agree that last night's events aside, the fact that Russia is launching missile attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure whilst world leaders meet shows the utter contempt that Putin has for international order?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Lady? I entirely agree with what she said. President Putin started this war, and whatever the determination made in relation to the events yesterday, they result, whether directly or indirectly, from the unlawful aggression perpetrated by the Russian government. And that's why the Prime Minister is out at the G20, rallying support, making sure we wean ourselves off energy dependence on Russia, making sure we make sure we've got the energy supply from other parts of the world. And I agree with what she said 100%.
Angela Rayner.
Oh,
Can I thank the Right Honourable Lady, Mr.
Yes.
Raab begins his answer, for asking a serious question about World
Yeah.
War III rather than about me. You could almost
Rise above it.
detect the relief in the man's voice. But yes, I mean, and a good look for Labour to put that at the top. Frankly, it is the biggest event of the week, and it's one where they will want to look and sound different from predecessor regimes in their party.
And also present, government in waiting. We're discussing the serious issues. Let no one say that we're trivialising matters. I mean, it'd be amazing if she got through this whole thing without raising the bullying allegations. Don't forget, you can watch along on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Should have said that before. Ollie is watching in Bedford, Lou in Pennsylvania. And Richard says, Matt, shout out to the Plymouth College Politics Club. Big fans. We watch this each week. It doesn't sound like it's voluntary, but it sounds like it might be a lunchtime voluntary thing.
Good for them.
Let's get this on the curriculum. That's what we need.
Well, let's have them on at some point.
Yeah, we should get them on. That's a good idea. Write that down, someone. Let's get the Politics Club on. They can do PMQs Unpacked one week. We can just sit back and do nothing. Right, lovely. Yeah, get on the YouTubes. You can text me 87222. Start your message with the word Times. Let me know what you think of it so far. Let's go back. Question 2 for Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's right that we condemn Putin in his strongest terms. But the G20 is also an opportunity to work together to tackle the economic challenges we all face. Yet as our international allies race to crack down on multinationals using tax havens to stash profits abroad, this government is dragging its feet to protect their profits. We have a budget tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, where it's briefed that tough choices will be impacting on families across Britain. Does he accept that every pound hidden in tax havens is a pound lost from the pockets of working families?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady? I mean, look, we want people to come to this country to create the jobs and to generate the tax revenue. Whether it's non-dom status, which was stricter under this government, given the changes we made, than under the last Labour government. Whether it's the Prime Minister's approach to big tech companies, where he's led the charge with the G presidency in making sure there's an international approach and delivering global minimum corporate tax rules. We have lowered the tax gap, the difference between the tax owed and the tax raised, to the lowest level, certainly lower than under the last Labour government, and will continue to do so.
Another serious policy question.
Yes, policy. We're doing a lot of policy today. Not that we should sound disappointed about
No.
that, you understand.
And again, Labour tried to draw that divide. I'm not sure she did it in a particular, in a painting in primary colours way, but Labour tried to draw that distinction that, Jeremy Hunt saying at the weekend everyone's going to be paying more tax, and Labour was saying, well, if you've got the big multinationals to pay more tax, that every pound or penny you raise from them is a pound or penny you don't need to raise from working people.
Yeah, that's right. And Raab's answer was again sort of accurate and made the Tory case, but again, not in particularly straightforward terms. He could have said, this Prime Minister has raised the tax burden on these companies, and he did it around the world and persuaded even the Americans to sign up to it. But he didn't quite put it like that. But yeah, this is, it's a long-running theme, isn't it, between the two sides. Labour's going to hit the Tories for being too close to big business and too close to donor types who hide their money offshore and don't, are quite good at avoiding tax in an entirely legal way.
Which again, I imagine we'll hear a lot about from the Labour front bench tomorrow. In fact, sitting behind Angela Rayner, on one side you've got Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, who will have a big moment tomorrow. It's a big test for her going up against Jeremy Hunt, and how Labour responds to that. We'll bring you that live on the show tomorrow. Let's go back then to the House of Commons. It's Deputy PMQs Unpacked. I'll get that right by the time it's finished. Deputy PMQs Unpacked. We'll go back to question number 3 for Angela Rayner.
Notice non-dom status hasn't been abolished, though, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives would have us all believe that the economic problems are out of their hands, when the truth is, Mr. Speaker, it's working people paying the price for their choices. They've chosen to protect corporate profits and not household incomes. There are 38 countries in the OECD 2-year growth league table. Where does the UK rank in that table?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank her. She'll know that on the latest data, unemployment remains at a 50-year low. Well, she's saying the Shadows Chancellor is saying it's gone up. It's half the level left by the last Labour government. And when it comes to GDP, and when it comes to GDP, she'll know that the IMF has said that we will have the strongest growth in the G7.
Well, for those that aren't across the OECD Growth League table, where do you know where we are?
I don't, but I imagine we're pretty low.
I think we could be pretty cold. We might even be 38 out of 38th.
But it does
38.
show you can choose your statistics and. But,
where are we
we
on
have
growth?
the strongest
Well, the important
growth
thing
in
is
the
we've got
G7.
very low unemployment. Although, I mean, there's a separate conversation there about the number of people who've just left the jobs market altogether. And if you lump them in, then unemployment doesn't look quite so rosy. But once again, Angela Rayner, I suppose what Angela Rayner is doing here is avoiding falling into the trap that actually the Labour Party might have done 6 months ago, 12 months ago, done all 6 questions on Dominic
I imagine
Raab.
she'll do 2 or 3.
Yeah. Because
She's also creating this sort of weird tension, which I quite like.
where is it?
Raab must be sort of, the exquisite tension of waiting for himself to become the subject of it. And maybe if she never does it,
Yeah.
all his great response lines will remain.
The vein will start going.
The vein will go and it's sort of all pent up inside him.
The other thing she's doing...
Maybe he'll react with rage.
A bit. She'll throw some tomatoes at him.
Exactly.
The other thing she's doing a bit, I remember speaking to William Hague about this, when he was up with it, all he could try and do was try and wrong foot Tony Blair a bit at PMQs. And so would jump around asking about different topics. And at one point, Tony Blair had 2 folders, all in alphabetical order. So it was like forests and then gardens and then horses and whatever it might be. Just trying to wrong foot him by asking about zoos and then asking about balloons or whatever. And she's doing that a little bit as well in terms of not quite knowing where you're going and do I use this fact on this question because she might come back again in a minute. I'm going to need a line on that. So, a lot of prep going on in the Ministry of Justice this morning.
Yes, exactly. And, old hands like Damien McBride on the Labour side who do occasionally help out with the PMQ prep, that's the kind of thing that... they've seen in action for years.
Yeah, so we've done Poland, we've done windfall taxes, we've done non-DOMs, and now we've done the Britain's place in the OECD Growth League table. There were 38 countries. I wonder where we are. We can go back to Angela Rayner and find
I think
out.
she's going to tell us.
Mr. Speaker, I think the economic situation families face speaks for itself. Yeah. But I'll answer the question for the Deputy Prime Minister. The answer is 38 out of 38 on growth. If there was a World Cup for growth, we wouldn't even qualify. Working people are paying the price for 12 years of Tory failure. The wrong choices by the wrong people. Now, after days of dodging and denial, this morning, the Deputy Prime Minister finally acknowledged formal complaints about his misconduct. But his letter contains no hint of admission or apology. This is anti-bullying. This is anti-bullying week. Will he apologise?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Lady? Look, in terms of the economic challenges which are global, caused by COVID and the war in Ukraine, we've got a plan to grip inflation, balance the books and drive economic growth. If we listen to the Honourable Lady, debt would go up, unemployment would go up and working Britons would pay the price. She asked about the complaints. I received notification this morning. I immediately asked the Prime Minister to set up an independent inquiry into them. I'm confident I behaved professionally throughout, but of course I will engage thoroughly and look forward, Mr. Speaker, may I say, look forward to transparently addressing any claims that have been made.
I think that was worth a bing.
I was writing down what he was saying. I was doing my best shorthand. I'm confident I've behaved professionally throughout.
Yeah, that doesn't mean nicely.
No.
It just means professionally. And this is the thing. These things are, there is a long, in people's human behaviour, the kind of bosses we're prepared to tolerate it's on a spectrum, isn't it? And one man's tough is another man's abusive. And this is why there are these complaints procedures. And until now, Raab has been able to say no formal complaints. And if there aren't formal complaints, it's very difficult to do much about it. And, lots of us have heard about incidents involving all sorts of ministers in all sorts of different ways. And if there are no formal complaints, it's very difficult to write the story a lot of the time if people don't come forward. In this case, people are flocking forward.
And what should we read? Because he repeated this in the Commons, but he said it in his letter as well, the letter he wrote to the Prime Minister. He welcomes the opportunity to address any complaints transparently. What's he getting? Is it because he basically wants to be able to publicly rubbish? I don't know what.
Well, look, if you speak to people,
unusual turn of
I
phrase.
should stress, one of the people I know best who worked for Dominic Raab doesn't work for him anymore, but would say that a lot of his frustration was down to a department that wasn't functioning terribly well and officials who were not doing what he wanted them to do. And they could hide behind getting upset at his behaviour. The reason he was upset was because they weren't doing their jobs properly. Now, that may be what he uses in his defence, if indeed he needs a defence. Let's see, how strong these allegations are. The other thing I'm very struck by, and at the beginning I thought he's been told to be polite, look like a nice, polite boy. I thank the Right Honourable Lady for all of his answers.
Yeah.
But the more he uses it, the more it just seems a bit slightly controlled and a little bit sort of confirming the
Deep breath, Dom.
deep breath, don't get upset. Tell her, thanks very much for your horrible question. And it initially seemed sort of relaxed and calm, and initially he was obviously delighted to be asked about something else. But there's a little bit of man pressing a knife into his leg, going, "Keep calm, whatever you do."
Every page has got "keep calm" written at the top of it. Sarah Jane's been in touch saying Liz Truss was ousted by a lettuce. Dominic Raab next by a tomato. Which other salad items might be lurking to ambush unwitting cabinet ministers?
Well, I bet you're annoyed you didn't come up with that one.
Well, I might credit her tomorrow when we do a whole thing on cucumbers. But anyway, there we are. Keep those coming in. 87222 start messages with the word Times. You can still watch along live on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Mark says Angela Rayner is so much better at this than Sir Keir Bland. Rayner is doing well, but how many people still feel she's better than Starmer, says Jeff. Seemed like a lot of waffle there from Raab, says Benjamin. The problem with constantly quoting stats as replied, people lose interest very quickly, hard to follow. It's possible, Benjamin. That's the reason he's doing it. But anyway,
I did think the World Cup joke was quite good.
That was quite a good joke.
Of all the things Rayner said, that's the one that might cut through. That we wouldn't have even qualified in 38.
That feels like something the Labour Party might tweet out later.
Yes, I mean, if they wanted to improve on it, they could say, we'd have been knocked out in the knockouts in the qualification stages by X and name whichever godforsaken place was the 37th on the list.
But there we are. We've got one more to go. There's two more to go. We've got to get on with it.
It's been so exciting. It seems to have flown
I've
by.
lost track. So here we go. Let's go back to the House of Commons. It's Deputy PMQs Unpacked. Tim Shipman, chief political commentator of the Sunday Times, is here. We go back to the House of Commons now. It's Angela Rayner, question 5.
So, Mr. Speaker, let me get this straight. He has had to demand an investigation into himself because the Prime Minister is too weak to get a grip. A Prime Minister in office less than a month, with a disgraced cabinet minister resigned with his good wishes, the Home Secretary who breached the ministerial code and risked national security still clings on, and now the Prime Minister defends his deputy whose behaviour has been described as abrasive, controlling and demeaning. With junior staff, Mr. Speaker, too scared to even enter his office. And that's without mentioning the flying tomatoes. The Deputy Prime Minister knows his behaviour was unacceptable. So what's he still doing here?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm here and happy to address any specific point she wishes to make. That never happened, she says, from a sedentary position, and I will thoroughly rebut and refute any of the claims that have been made. She hasn't, in fact, put a specific point to me. If she wishes to do so, and this is her opportunity, I'd be very glad to address it.
I'd be so delighted.
If
only you had something specific to raise.
The deputy manager of a building society, I'm just here to help vibe.
Yes.
He's really clinging on to.
If you'd like to apply for a mortgage, I'll find 19 reasons why you can't have it, but you can have a cup of tea at the same time.
Could I get you a chair?
Yes.
Some decent stuff there from Angela Rayner. And again, this is interesting, the Labour Party, and you sort of the machinations that go on behind the scenes. It became clear from PMQs last week, where Keir Starmer used 2 week, three to in an echo of week by Tony Blair against John Major. She's slipping in there. This isn't just about Dominic Raab. This is about Rishi Sunak.
Unable to tackle all these things, unable to stand up to these guys. I think, I haven't seen too much polling on this yet. I'm going to be sitting in a focus group tomorrow evening, which will help inform our coverage of the budget for the weekend. But I'm going to ask about this, or at least get somebody to ask about it. I think it's interesting to see whether the slight sense that Rishi Sunak's this tiny little bloke who can't stand up to all these bullies, which plays into his physicality as well. I think it's interesting. Twitter will hate me, but I can't resist. We had Keir Starmer's secretary, and now we've got Angela Rayner's secretary.
Stig Abel does the same. Stig Abel does secretary.
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I got
maybe
a
he
lot
could
of
be leader,
abuse on
right?
Twitter
last time I
pointed it out. So, we've got to stick to our guns here.
And I think when Dominic Raab said that never happened, I think he was referring to the tomato gate, wasn't he?
I think that was exactly what he's referring to. And that has been healthily denied. And I have to say, even leaky civil servants who are not great fans of Mr. Raab, who are people I'm in touch with, don't believe it happened either.
And if you haven't been across this is the suggestion he was accused of hurling tomatoes from a sandwich across a meeting room.
It wasn't even across the room, it was into a bag on his desk.
Yeah, he began a tirade, opened his Pret sandwich and threw 3 tomatoes out into a bag across the table, making a loud noise. There's quite a lot of that. I couldn't totally...
How loud a noise do 3 bits of tomato make going into a bag?
Maybe he was making the loud noise.
Oh, maybe, but...
Shouting, tomato!
God damn you. I wanted name a tomato. I would have done much better there if I could have thought of a clever name for a tomato.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the type of tomato.
But yeah, apparently it's he made clear he thought that was absolute nonsense and didn't happen. So there we go. Right, we go back to the House of Commons then. Let's see if Angela Rayner takes him up on the interesting invitation to ask him anything she wants about specifics of whether or not he was a bully. This is question number 6 on Deputy PMQs Unpacked. This is Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maybe he just doesn't think there's a problem, or maybe he's suggesting that civil servants are liars. Now he's reportedly banned from meeting junior staff without supervision. While we await an inquiry the Prime Minister hasn't even instigated from a watchdog he hasn't even appointed. In the Prime Minister's letter, he did not say how and when this will be investigated or by who. No ethics, no integrity and no mandate, and still no ethics advisor. So when will they appoint an independent ethics advisor and drain the swamp?
Mr. Speaker, the recruitment of the new ethics advisor is already underway and taking place at pace. But may I say, Mr. Speaker, there's a reason that she's come to the dispatch box with her usual mix of bluster and mudslinging. It's because they don't have a plan. Mr. Speaker, we're helping people into work. She's in hot to the unions. We're protecting our borders. She voted against every single measure to control illegal immigration for this country. We're delivering cleaner growth and energy security. She wants to send billions in reparation payments abroad. The British people want a government that can deal with the real challenges, and they're not up to it.
Lucy Allen.
Well,
you'd have to say Raab won that last exchange, I think.
The slightly weird thing was that Angela Rayner actually ended it on a question.
She didn't build. There was no peroration.
Yeah.
There was no clip for the media. And then, perfectly reasonable point to make about Sunak rabbiting on about integrity and still hasn't appointed an integrity advisor.
You'd almost have done
but that should have been question 4 or whatever, rather than...
Which we should point out, if you can remember all of this, Boris Johnson did have an ethics advisor, which was Lord Geit, who quit back in June after conceding the Prime Minister may have broken the ministerial code over the Partygate scandal. But he'd previously replaced
Alex Dudar.
I was trying to remember his name as well.
Alex Allen.
Alex Allen, that's right. Because
I get Alex Allen and Alex Aitken confused, but Alex Aitken is a comms guy, and Alex Allen. So Alex Allen, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Alex Allen. Yeah, and then he was the one who found that Priti Patel had bullied civil servants.
Correct, and was then serially ignored by the Prime Minister, and he then decided to walk, given that his advice was
He then
ignored.
resigned, and then Lord Geit was brought in to replace him.
Yes.
And was surprised to find that the man who sacked his independent ethics advisor for not doing what he wanted
continued to
continued
behave in such a
exactly the
fashion.
same way. It was an extraordinary turn of events. But it is a problem, isn't it? Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Number 10 and said this government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. And people have been pointing out this is a million miles away from John Major's back to basics. Everything then starts being seen through that prism. Nobody thought that Boris Johnson was going to lead a government led by integrity and
and
professionalism.
nor frankly did he really have a claim to.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yes.
He didn't claim to, and then when he didn't, it was like,
And
well, that's
Rishi
all...
Sunak's created a rod for his own back here, and these appointments are ones that he was advised by some people not to make. There we go. But yes, I mean that was. It wasn't much of a sort of substantive answer, but it was a good Tory trot through of the case against Labour. Unions, borders, this reparation payments as well, which popped up at the COP summit. That's going to be another one where they're going to sort of say, these people want to funnel more of your cash overseas. Why would they want to do that?
And it's why so many members of particularly the shadow cabinet and Labour MPs in general have a problem with Ed Miliband, because Ed Miliband set this hair running, the idea that Britain would pay cash to countries because we had an industrial revolution and they didn't, essentially. And Ed Miliband is, behind the scenes, got quite a lot of influence. Good piece in the Sunday Times about that this weekend, if you want to have a look back at it. A guy who was leader, who was not regarded as a roaring success, but in a range of ways is quietly quite influential on the Labour front bench. And a lot of people who thought his leadership was a bit of a turkey are not too happy about that. And a lot of them sit in the shadow cabinet alongside him. And it's because he does things like that, sort of musing out loud on things, which then gets thrown back at the
exactly.
the leader of PMQs.
And you know, they think Labour think they've got a decent chance of taking back a lot of those red wall seats. But if they don't, it'll be stuff like reparations for that sort of thing that will probably put a lot of voters' backs up.
So there we are. So I mean, Dominic Raab got through that. I suppose the thing about at least getting this out this morning sort of slightly took the wind out of Angela Rayner's sails. I mean, I thought quite apart. I mean, he said Dominic Raab said Angela Rayner would just turn up with all her usual bluster. Actually, she didn't. She didn't.
Yeah.
She didn't sort of quite play his game. She asked about Poland and the budget and non-doms and growth before she got round to the bullying allegations. But
no, I mean, Rayner clearly won it. But I think Raab is not bleeding on the pavement, which will be solace to some and a disappointment to others.
Well, we will find out. Did he manage to stay all calm and zen for the rest of Deputy PMQs? We will bring you the best of the rest next. And, of course, we'll do the quiz just before the end of the show. First, let's get a news and sport roundup from Mike Powell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. At Prime Minister's questions in the last few minutes, the Deputy Labour leader has challenged the Deputy Prime Minister over bullying allegations against him. During Anti-Bullying Week, Angela Rayner asked Dominic Raab to apologise to those who feel aggrieved.
This morning, the Deputy Prime Minister finally acknowledged formal complaints about his misconduct. But his letter contains no hint of admission or apology. This is anti-bullying. This is anti-bullying week. Will he apologise?
In response, Dominic Raab said he was taking action.
She asked about the complaints. I received notification this morning. I immediately asked the Prime Minister to set up an independent inquiry into them. I'm confident I behaved professionally throughout, but of course I will engage thoroughly and look forward, Mr. Speaker, may I say, look forward to transparently addressing any claims that have been made.
NATO's Secretary-General says there is no sign the missile that killed 2 people in Poland was a deliberate attack. Jens Stoltenberg says it was likely caused by a Ukrainian defence missile, but the country is not at fault. Poland's president has called it an unfortunate accident. MI5 has revealed it's discovered 10 plots by Iran to kidnap or assassinate people on British soil so far this year. Ken McCallum, the Director General of the UK's Domestic Intelligence Service, has made a wide-ranging speech. He says we should expect Russian aggression for years to come and is warning China is regularly trying to co-opt and influence. He disclosed that the UK and European allies have collectively expelled 400 Russian spies since January. Oscar winner Kevin Spacey has been charged with a further 7 sexual offences, bringing the total number he faces to 12. The Crown Prosecution Service says the latest charges relate to one man. As inflation hits a 41-year high, the Chancellor has warned of tough decisions in tomorrow's budget. Official figures show it's risen to 11.1%. Today's weather: severe gales affecting the far northeast of Scotland with rain at times. Elsewhere, sunny spells and scattered showers. Heavy rain and strong winds arriving in southern England later. And highs ranging between 7 in northern Scotland to 13 Celsius in southwest England. Now, Toby Gillis has the latest sports update.
A Danish journalist threatened with having his camera smashed whilst broadcasting live to his nation in Qatar has told us the incident has lifted a veil on what the country is really like when it's not using a World Cup for sports-washing purposes. Rasmus Tandholt was reporting from a roundabout in Doha yesterday night when 4 officials arrived, asked him to stop, and when he told them he was entitled to continue, they dished out the threat. Qatar's Supreme Committee has now issued an apology for the incident, but Tandholt told our sister station TalkSport he's pleased to have shone a light on what the country is really like.
I could have made like 10 well-produced TV stories for our news show, but that wouldn't reveal Qatar as those few seconds when they interrupted us during a live. I travel around the Middle East for 20 years and I tried a lot of things, but I didn't expect during the World Cup that I would experience, what happened yesterday. This is probably what normally happens in Qatar when there's not a World Cup.
Meanwhile, the Supreme Committee of the World Cup in Qatar has denied that they've paid fake fans to welcome teams and create an atmosphere during the tournament. England's arrival yesterday was greeted by Indian expats singing "It's Coming Home," who denied they'd taken bribes to do so. A statement by the organisers now say they thoroughly reject the assertions by journalists that these are fake fans, something Times chief sports correspondent Matt Lawton accepts.
I spent a lot of time talking to those guys, and I think they're the real deal. They were showing us WhatsApp groups with a couple of different groups with sort of 500 members. They knew their football. These guys absolutely obsess about the Premier League.
And England's one-day cricket captain Jos Buttler admits they may not be at their best when they face Australia in a one-day series starting tomorrow, just 4 days after winning the 2020 World Cup. All-rounder Moeen Ali has branded the scheduling horrible as the team flew to Adelaide with 10 of the World Cup squad set to feature in the first match. Buttler told Sky Sports News he didn't restrict the players' delight at their World Cup triumph, even with these matches arriving so quickly.
We've celebrated well. Days like that don't come along often in your careers, and we've had a lot of fun over the last few days, and just really taking it all in.
You can read more on these stories on the Times website or app.
Times Radio.
Connecting small business owners with the right tools and support to help them thrive in the digital economy. Find out more at mastercard.co.uk/strive.
Went to the toilet.
And we're back. Tim Shipman, chief political commentator for the Sunday Times, is here with me in the studio. How are you, Tim?
Much better now, thank you, Matthew, now that you've started speaking.
Yes, and yes, people are asking where have you been? Because I popped out of the studio. So if you're watching along on the Times Radio YouTube channel, you get an insight into what goes on in the studio during the news. The answer is not very much. But what we're going to do now is the best of the rest. We brought you Deputy PMQs Unpacked, Dominic Raab up against Angela Rayner, but there's plenty more to come from elsewhere in the comments. We sadly no Ian Blackford this week. Oh, he's off kilt shopping or something, I'm sure. So instead, we've got the SNP's deputy.
Looking after his croft.
Looking after his, exactly. A mere humble crofter.
Humble crofter.
A humble crofter. We've got deputy SNP leader in the House of Commons, Kirsten Oswald, up first, putting her question to Dominic Raab.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself and my colleagues with the remarks made about the immense contribution of our Sikh communities. Mr. Speaker, the SNP extend our full support and condolences this morning to Poland following the death of 2 civilians last night, and while a full investigation is ongoing, we reiterate our calls for Russia to end its brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister was asked 6 different times to apologise for the disaster of the Tory mini-budget and the financial crisis it caused. And all 6 times he refused to say sorry. And now, this morning, people are waking up to the news that this Christmas they will be hit with the worst inflation in 41 years. So will the Deputy Prime Minister stand up today and do what his boss wouldn't? Will he say sorry?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for what she said both about Poland but also about the importance of our solidarity with the international community against the appalling illegal invasion by Russia of Ukraine. Look, in terms of inflation, clearly that is a problem. I think as Chancellor and now as Prime Minister, and for months, it has been this Prime Minister who has been making clear that it is the #1 economic challenge we face. We've got a plan to grip inflation, to balance the books, to drive economic growth, and my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will be making a statement tomorrow, the autumn statement, which will set out our plan to take the Scottish people and everyone across the United Kingdom through these challenges.
Oswald.
That's not an apology, I think, is where we'd chalk that up as.
No, I mean, I understand why Labour are sort of going after this, and the Daily Lobby on the trip with Sunak seem to sort of want to do one of those, let's see how many times he refuses to do something. I have to say, I do think it's complete nonsense. Rishi Sunak spent the whole summer saying what they're about to do is a disaster that's going to lead to rampant inflation. If one person has the right to not apologise for it, I think it's probably him. You know, I understand politically why it perhaps works for Labour to get Tories squirming about the mess that they've made. But, you know, Sunak was precisely installed because he opposed all this stuff and had been proved right.
Yeah. There is an interesting political calculation going on here, though, where on the steps of number 10 when he became Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak said he admired Liz Truss's restlessness, but some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions, but mistakes nonetheless. And I've been elected as my leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part to fix them. And what number 10 of the government seems to have tried to do in recent days is move away from the idea that tomorrow's autumn statement is a product of those mistakes made by the Conservative government.
Yeah, and I find that slightly curious.
It's an international issue.
Yeah, it's an international issue, which undoubtedly it is. I mean, someone cleverer than me can tell you what percentage of this is down to Ukraine, what percentage of it's down to Brexit, what percentage of it's down to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng mucking up. But Sunak began his premiership very clearly saying we're here to clear up their mess, which allowed him to sort of look like a new administration and distance himself from it, which is quite helpful normally for a new Prime Minister. But they seem now, in the interests of Tory unity, to not be playing that card particularly hard. And now maybe they've got polling that says that it wasn't working anyway. I don't know. But it seemed rhetorically to me a not bad position for him to be putting himself in.
The way that Boris Johnson had created his premiership as being year zero, ignoring what happened to Theresa May. Yeah, I suppose the counter argument to that is, and I heard George Osborne was on Andrew Neil's show at the weekend, and he's basically saying David Cameron and George Osborne could claim they were clearing up the mess left by Labour. going into an election boasting that you cleared up the mess left by your own party is a slightly harder sell.
And you know, it may be that we're too far down the tracks now, and the public's sick of the entire Tory enterprise.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference. In fact, if you look at the polls, then people aren't falling in love with Rishi Sunak,
no,
particularly. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons now. Lots of questions from. Let's go. Let's not do Bambos, Joe Lambos. In fact, let's move on. Let's do Jacob Rees-Mogg first of all, former cabinet minister. Jacob Rees-Mogg bumped out, of course, by.
He jumped.
He jumped
on St Crispin's Day.
He merely wanted to. He merely wanted to make some space and understand that Rishi Sunak needed to do his thing. So let's. Have we got Jacob Rees-Mogg? No, we haven't yet. We'll bring him in just a moment. It'll be interesting to see how the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg respond post-autumn statements tomorrow. Everyone's been slightly holding back, wait and see what they do.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg are not going to like.
Yeah.
Those people were inherently in favour of what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng were doing, and feel that the baby was thrown out with the bathwater, and we're now going to get, lots of spending cuts and a huge rise in tax.
Well, let's go where we can now hear from him. This is Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if my right honourable and learned friend has noticed that the people who are currently criticising him, who are currently criticising him, have a record of bullying second to none. A Labour Member of Parliament left Parliament because of anti-Semitic bullying. Yeah. A distinguished BBC journalist needed bodyguards at Labour Party conferences. And a current member of the Labour Party opposite, a right honourable member, was suspended from the service of this House for bullying. Does he think, as I do, that this is at the very least hypercritical, and maybe a stronger word that is not necessarily parliamentary?
My right honourable friend makes his point in his usual inimitable way. All I will say is I think it's important that we all take responsibility for our actions, and that's precisely what I've done today.
I mean, it's an interesting point that Jacob Rees-Mogg makes.
Yes.
We had it yesterday when we were talking about Dominic Raab a lot on the show. People were saying, I don't remember, Gordon Brown throwing mobile phones.
No, I mean, on this sort of thing, it's a chamber of hypocrisy, isn't it? But I remember what my old mum used to say: 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Well, I was just thinking that it's not the most helpful intervention from Jacob Rees-Mogg. Basically,
whatever you've done, Mr. Raab, and I suspect you've done some of it.
I mean, you might be a bully, but there are other bullies. It's not the they done it as well. Is not the best of.
Good to hear his, as Raab put it, inimitable dulcet
I wasn't sure when he said no,
more.
Thank you. Was that because
I think he was being asked to intervene? Someone was asking to intervene on him,
or possibly defect. One of the two. But either way, in his characteristic style, he politely declined. Right, we take one more question now. I think from let's do Edward Lee. I think because. He interested him. It was about just over a week ago now. We brought up Stephen Kinnock, the Labour's shadow immigration minister, brought up the idea on this show of a return to identity cards, the idea of ID cards as a way of curbing migration, an issue that Edward Lee, the Conservative MP, raises now.
Even if an illegal migrant is stopped on a French beach, as no one is ever arrested, he will simply come back the next day. Will the Deputy Prime Minister ensure that we remove all pull factors for illegal migration by using his new Bill of Rights to ensure that we have the legal power to arrest and deport and detain illegal migrants, and, for instance, have a review about a national identity card so that people just don't vanish and they never ever get deported?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend? I totally agree with him that we need to strain every sinew to stop this appalling trade in misery. There's no silver bullet. I think the agreement that the Home Secretary made with her French opposite number will help. We're embedding UK officials with their French counterparts for the first time. He's right that the Bill of Rights can help as well, not least in preventing interim orders from the Strasbourg court from being recognised in the UK courts. On ID cards, we already have e-visas for people coming to visit and live in the UK, and they act as digital evidence of someone else's immigration status. The one thing that's clear, though, and I say to an honourable friend, we'll have to do all of these things in the teeth of the opposition from the front bench opposite.
Not really, if the front bench opposite, at least some of them, Stephen Kinnock is calling for returning to ID cards. Rishi Sunak has ruled them out this week, actually, when he was in Bali, saying...
I reach wearily into my wallet and pull out...
Have you got one?
Well, no, but I've got a driving licence.
Oh,
with my picture on it. I've got a press card that's got my picture on it. I've got an app on here which has my medical status, I mean, please...
So this week, Rishi Sunak says on ID cards, I don't think that's the way to solve this problem. Pointed to e-visas, that's obviously the line to take, as Dominic Raab did, saying if you are coming here to visit or indeed to work, then you essentially have a form of digital identity that can be checked by those who need to check it. So but there's almost an argument not to just do it. If you're saying that basically everyone's got some form of ID,
just put it on an app.
Just put it all together. Yeah. And
people don't want a card. They might accept an app. Everyone was like, oh, this is very suspicious, this NHS app. We don't want that. And then when they realised they could have their vaccine status on it, everybody went, this is brilliant. It's amazing. We've actually made technology work for once in this country.
Everyone's given their personal details to a website currently run by a lunatic like Elon Musk. The idea that the amount of private information we give to Amazon and Google and Facebook and Twitter... The idea that having essentially your name and address and date of birth on an app is an interesting question.
I've struggled to regard this as anything other than absurd since the Blair days when it was a sort of massive civil liberties issue, and it's nonsense, isn't it, really?
Well, maybe Stephen Kinnock was right. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your company as ever, Tim Shipman, Chief Political Commentator for the Sunday Times. What are we looking out for this weekend?
Well, aftermath of the budget, I think, probably.
Yeah. So you've had...
But then what is this government going to do next? You know, everything so far has been about this budget. Is it a success? Does it
surviving each week?
Surviving it would be something.
Yeah.
And then, is there going to be anything else?
We will wait and see.
We will wait and see.
Lovely to see. That's where us all up. Thank you for watching online on the YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. And if you've missed it and you want to catch up, you'll be able to catch up on the Red Box podcast later, wherever you get your podcasts from. Right, up next, how much is your roast dinner costing? Delicious. And we'll do the quiz. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio in association with MasterCard Strive's UK programme. You can find out more at mastercard.co.uk/Strive.
Jane Garvey and Fee Glover on Times Radio.
We've made it as far as Wednesday, which means sound your gong. We're talking about standing up in our gong-beating wellness segment. Apparently, standing up at work might be significantly better for you than slouching in your seat. We're also talking tech with Katie Prescott, and our special guest is the novelist Emma Donoghue.